Aloha mai kākou. Thank you for, Mr. Mayor, for having me be a part of the day. I'm honored and I'm terrified. You asked me to speak about leadership. I don't know anything about it. And in a room of leaders, real navigators, in this room, right now, with enormous amounts of responsibility for the future of these islands. I'm intimidated, but I'm honored. Thank you. And I want to have a personal thing. It's kind of emotional for me. Last night, my two children asked, and with permission, Mayor, if I could just speak about sending deepest condolences to all the souls that were lost on New Year's night, and to all those who have suffered because of an accident. They asked me to make sure that they're honored and they're present, and they asked me to make sure that we hope for healing, and they want to hope for change. And I think that there's no better leader to do that than you. So, on behalf of my family, thank you. You know, I don't know that much about leadership, but I was asked to speak about it. But I am a privileged witness to those who changed the world because they believed they could. And so as a witness, permit me to just bring names into this room so we don't forget who they are. And I don't know much of anything, but I do know that I spent half a century on a canoe and sailed far because of them. The first two of three individuals were the founders of the Polynesian Voyaging Society. They were dreamers, they were mentors, they're like you, they're courageous. And they had vision, they had dreams, and they pushed it and exercised it. And why was it important? Because maybe if you go back in time, maybe 2,000 years ago, we don't know, because we forgot. A voyaging canoe would come to Hawaii, and the first footprints of human beings would be on the sand here, 2,000 years ago. And they came for a place it's called the Land of the Golden Haze, Kaikinui. And they would be arguably the greatest voyagers and navigators and explorers on the earth at that time. But we forgot. And there's reasons for that forgetting. 200 years ago, there were other voyages that came here that drove enormous change in a society that was not prepared for it. And everything started to shift. 101 years ago, my father was born. And he'd be the first generation in maybe 100 that would not be taught language or culture, because his loving parents felt that if he was going to be who he was, then he's going to get hurt. 99 years ago, the public school systems would outlaw language and culture in our schools throughout the whole Hawaiian Islands, because it had no value to a changing world. It was a dead language. And make a long story short, the black road, the shiny black road of extinction is well paved. Well paved. It's in the forgetting that we lose who we are. And there's a cliff at that black road that we can't see, but when you go over the cliff, there's no way back. It's extinction. And there were two dreamers. I want to bring them in the room. One was a surfer from Santa Barbara, who in the mid-50s would enter graduate school in anthropology. studying this fascination about the ocean and the biggest continent in the world, Pacific Islands. Pacific Islands, 22 times larger than continental United States. The biggest continent in the world, spread across the hugest landmass, the oceans. And trying to figure out how they do that. And that same time in the mid-50s, there was a Hawaiian, born and raised in Waipio. Grandfather told him of old stories of the voyaging canoes, the great navigators, one of the few that still remembered glimpses, while the rest of us forgot. And he was in Chicago, where he was opening up his art studio and his business. His name is Herb Kawainui Kane, dreamer. 1958, Dr. Ben Finney, the surfer anthropologist, came to Hawaii to do his postdoctorate, and a lady, a professor, you know, women professor, you can count them on one hand back then, in a world that wasn't equal, came up to him angry, 2 books, handed to him and said, "These books are wrong, change them." All of a sudden, the dream became about justice. It was Kon-Tiki, Thor Heyerdahl, that placed a story across a book and a film would educate the world about a history that wasn't ours. Then there was an anthropologist from New Zealand who was world-renowned, Andrew Sharp, wrote a book about voyaging Pacific people. He said, oh, no, they weren't on reed rafts. They had canoes, they could sail, but they did not have the intelligence to navigate over 100 miles. How do you account for Hawaii 24 times that? Her name was Catherine Luamala. Handed in the books. You take these books, read it, change it. Voyaging became an issue of justice at that moment. And it took 10 years for someone, the director from the Bishop Museum, to tell Herb and Ben Finney, Herb Kane and Ben Finney, you need to talk to each other. You have the same dream. One in San Diego and one in Chicago. You need to talk to each other. 1950, it was 1968 that they would be a single phone call. They combined the dreams, science, with culture and traditions and genealogy. They researched. They held it in private. They kept it quiet because they felt that nobody would understand why a canoe would be important to the modern world. The Black Road is well paved. But they would come to Hawaii, and basically, make a long story short, they would launch. They would launch the vehicle, the spaceship of our ancestors. They would launch ideas and beliefs and values. They launched courage. They launched something that possibly could change the world. And they launched it, but Herb Kawainui Kane would say, my wife did an interview with him 2 months before he died. And he spoke about launching that canoe and saying, we must take this canoe around the Hawaiian Islands. We must go to our communities. If our communities don't accept the dream, if our communities don't accept the ideals and the beliefs that we are descendants of great navigators, then he said, the voyaging of Hokulea would only be a stunt. The acceptance of community is key to everything we do in the future. And this launch shifted everything. But one thing it did, it invited Piailug, nicknamed Mao. Mao means to be fierce as a navigator. Piailug, handful, one of 6 of the last masters on earth. Sorry, I'm not a master, I'm just a student. Thank you on the introduction, it was okay. But he's the master. And he did 2 miracles in Hawaii. 1976, he sailed Hokulea. If you stand on the beach of Waikiki and go look at, draw an imaginary angle to the east side of Tahiti, another one to the west, less than half a degree. Go find it with the stars. And he did, 31 days. And I will say, that began the seed of change in Pacific Islands people. The thing about it that was so important was it was pride and dignity in something that was common to who we were, the voyaging canoe. The single most important, single central artifact of our people. Herb Connie said that. The voyaging canoe makes us common. Finding that common denominator that we can come together, put everything else aside, and make change. And then Piailug would come back on the other miracle and train us for 28 years. 28 years. And do know that sometimes leaders need to break the rules. Micronesia's school, the school he's from, is called Wodiong. It's 4,000 years old. They do not teach outside the culture. They do not teach outside the island. They do not teach outside the family because it's so powerful. But Mao watched the changing world and said, if we don't teach, it's going to go extinct. So he asked two things of us: come learn and teach. 28 years he would come. I want to share with you a couple stories about not just to our mayor, but to our city council and to all the leaders in this room. Governor, it's really good to see you. Thank you for being here. They're personal stories. For me, the story is about fear and how it will crush you. 1978, we would lose Eddie. But Eddie's dream was to pull Tahiti out of the sea. Sail Hokulea, pull Tahiti out of the sea. To bring pride and dignity, give it to our elders so they could give it to our children. Bam! That's the equation. We needed Mao to teach. He came back, and we were in immersion training for 28 months in the ocean every day. If we didn't touch salt water, he'd make us swim nighttime in the black to make sure you can't see underneath you, to come calm when you have to confront fear. And everything was just so extraordinary. It was the greatest time of my life, just being every day being with him, every day learning, until for about almost 2 years of training, until bam, Captain Pianaya of Hokulea chose the date to leave Hawaii to Tahiti, and I crashed. If it was just learning, then it was really exciting. But now it was like, I'm going to have to be tested. I'm going to have to take risk. And I'm not afraid of the ocean, but I'm afraid of failing. And I started to crash, because then I started to think, I can't do this. And then I stopped believing in my teacher. And he was angry. He was so angry that because he saw me failing at the final exam. The final exam is simple. You choose between courage or fear. And he saw me going down the wrong road, and I wanted him to give me the magic, his magic, the master's magic, so that I guarantee I wouldn't miss Tahiti, because I was too afraid to fail. And you know why? Because I was Hawaiian. Because failure was an expectation of us, because we're not good enough. And it crippled us. It may not be the same for the young in this room. It was a different time. And so Mao finally says, get in the car. Take me to a lanai lookout. I want to look at sunset. Sunrise and sunset's the most important time to train and pay attention. That's when you start to look at the weather. And we get there. We've been there hundreds of times. I'm looking for the magic. And give me the magic, Mao. And he goes, okay. We stood there for an hour. Waited for dusk to get dark enough for the big bright stars to come out. He said, Show me the star compass, not the magic. That's what we learned in day one, the star compass. Show me the 32 houses of the stars. He knows I know that. And he asked me to show it to him, and I did. He goes, okay. He goes, show me the star house to Tahiti. That's day number 2. It's not the magic. But he asked me to show it to him, so I pointed to it. And then Mom asked me, can you see the island? And he knows, I know, that island is way over the curve of the earth, very far away. He knows you can't see it with your eyes. But I knew that no wasn't the answer. So I didn't say anything. He goes, can you see the island? And I hesitated. He yelled again. And I said, Mao, I can see the island in my mind. He goes, okay, good. You ever lose the island in your mind, you will be lost. But Mao was talking about something larger than courage. He was talking about something about faith. Faith, ancestors, genealogy, the legacy, all your teachers. Trust them. And so but I still wasn't solid inside, and faith wasn't in me because fear was too strong. We got the Hilo going to depart in March of 1980 for Tahiti. And it rained for 5 days. I hope it rained forever. Because if it rains and we can't go, like we can blame it on the weather, but so you can't blame it on my fear. And Mao was angry, and we were walking on the sidewalk by the Nainoa Hotel, 1980, and he stops me, and it was pouring rain, and he was just drenched coming down his face, in his eyes, and his eyes were red because he was angry. He goes, Nainoa, we're going. He said, when the storm comes, you get up, you put on your jacket, you face the wind, and you stay there. You become humble. You become respectful of the storm. And then he said, you pay attention. Your job is to get your crew in the canoe out of the storm. That's your job. You stay there the whole time. One thing you never do is ever show them that you're afraid. Face the storm. And to me, this is a room of navigators. Collective. This is the elected body of our leadership of these precious Hawaiian Islands. Who decides the future of Hawaii? Who is going to create the sail plan for tomorrow? Who makes those decisions? Whose responsibility is that? And I would argue that why it's intimidating to me, because to a large degree it's you. All of you, collectively. Remember Herb said that we had to have acceptance. You know, it's interesting for me that the reason why I say that is that the reason why I'm here, because I've never done an inauguration before, because I never thought I had anything to say. But it's different today. The times are different. You feel it in the communities. How many times have you, any of you in the room, or maybe you haven't, ever thought about, or someone coming up to you, a friend or a family member, say, man, I'm not so sure I can live in Hawaii anymore. Times have changed. Then in November of 2022, Kamehameha Schools, which did arguably the best kind of demographics on our people, and saying for the first time, assuredly, more Native Hawaiians aren't here anymore. It's one of the storms. And I hate to bring it up, but it's constantly in me because there are those in the community that are anxious. There are those in the community that are afraid, and they come to me and say, do something. That's why I'm here. And that, in many ways, I'm honored to be here, Mayor, because I know you. When the storm comes every single time of your life, you put your jacket on, and you stand, and you face it. It's the kind of courage that we need, that inspires people to be better than they are, or inspires them to be larger than they are. That kind of courage that sets the course. One thing we must do is come together, unified. Because Hawaii, as you know, is a really special place. The world's not going to change Hawaii. Hawaii's going to change the world. If our leadership can come together, stand up together, it's the only way. There's no other option. And I do know in this issue of the community in fear is another factor. They are courageous. I've been sailing a lot, maybe 200 different indigenous communities around the world. I've gone around the planet with that canoe, and we went to learn. I've come home to recognize that there's no place like Hawaii, that our movement towards restoration, towards a sustainable future, towards protecting the things that matter, our effort of people in our schools, in the halls of our universities, in the poorest of our communities, in the watersheds, on the coral reefs, there is nothing like it. That Hawaii is a place of courage in the communities that will take us to a place that Hawaii will be seen as the light of hope, and the light of courage, and that's precisely what leadership is. I want to say thank you for having me. I'm here because it's a really challenging times. I've never seen the intensity of the storms like the way they are now. But at the same time, I've never seen a time when we're more courageous in Hawaii, and it needs its leadership. And I look at this room and go, this is the room of navigators. This is the room of change. And you're po'o, both of you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Nainoa Thompson.